Hey there, my dear storytellers. It's Mary Rose coming back to you on a Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I'm glad to be back with you guys. If any of you are watching on Facebook as opposed to YouTube, do the Facebook magic trick. Go to streamyard.com/Facebook. Give permission to show your name. This way, when you leave a comment, I will know who you are, since you already know who I am, I think. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Mary Rose Wood. I'm an author. I am also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is where I train and mentor writers. You can get on the mailing list over at pathofthestoryteller.com, and I hope you will, because there's just lots of writing craft, story structure, and the mindset of the working, thriving writer goodness that we love to share over at Path of the Storyteller. Am I right or am I right? That's what this weekly live stream is all about. We're here on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time, unless something comes up, in which case I usually do a blog post instead, but I am certainly here most Wednesdays. Let me take a moment to say hi to the folks who are here live, because I appreciate them very much. Of course, I also appreciate those of you who are watching the replay. But Anne is here live, and I'm waving hi to Anne, and I see some other folks are here live. You can feel free to leave a comment if you want to say hi. Let folks know who's watching and where you're watching from, because storytellers are just everywhere, aren't we? We all love stories. We co-evolved with stories, as my friend and student Avon likes to say. People, meaning us, and stories co-evolved. It's not just a recent invention. It's not a recreational pursuit. Storytelling is very significant. I find it so, and I think if you're watching this, you find it so also. Let me say hi to Molly, to Cynthia, to Nancy, to Hillary. So great to see you all. Hey, let's introduce our topic today by bringing up an important sharing from Molly, who is already posted in the comments. I love it, Molly. This live stream is so timely, Molly says. I just tried to read a book that head hopped horribly. It was so discombobulating. Juicy vocab word there, Molly. I love it. I decided to give up, which was such a shame, as the rest of it was good. There we have it, storytellers. Molly has gotten our discussion off to a roaring start. Our topic today is this idea of head hopping. And as you can see from what Molly just shared, it's not that great for the reader. Now, I'm going to, back up a little bit, talk about what head hopping is, talk about a little bit of third person. We're going to nerd out a little bit on third person point of view technique. And then I want to address this really essential point that Molly just raised, which is that it runs the risk of creating a very disruptive and alienating experience for the reader. And that obviously is the opposite of what we writers want to do, right? We want to draw our readers in. We want to keep them reading and turning the pages. We don't want to send them in a discombobulated fit to say, I give up. I can't keep up with this anymore. It's just hopping around too much. So the question of head hopping feels like a yes or no already, right? Because Molly just said it didn't work for me, so I put this book down. But one of the things that I want to tease out a little bit is the nuance, because I will argue that there are occasions when writers are going to want to not head hop perhaps, but make a little bit more rich use of the potentialities of writing in third person. So we're going to talk about, like, maybe a little head hopping sometimes could work under these circumstances, but most of the time, how it actually does impact the reader, and why we're so tempted to do it, even in published books, Molly. That makes me, give my usual rueful nod. A lot of books get published and out on the bookshelves without having a proper vetting, which is a sad thing to say, but true. All right, you guys ready to head hop? I think so. All right, so let's talk about what it is. Head hopping is, put simply, in a third person narrative, when the narration, the storytelling, if you will, it inhabits the inner life of not just one character, but many characters, and often making quite rapid changes, right? It goes from one inner experience to another character's inner experience to another. Sometimes this could all happen in the same scene. So that verb hopping, it's not like a leisurely tour of different perspectives. It's head hopping. It has this kind of rapid, almost random and jarring quality about it. So hopping is a pretty good verb to use to describe it. So it's not something that we typically need to worry about in a first person narrative, right? Because by definition, a first person narrative is being told by the viewpoint character, almost always by the main character of your story. So there's a difference in talking about head hopping between first and third. So let's just review, for anyone who's out there who needs a quick review, what we've got, what our meaning is when we talk about the difference between first person and third. So first person is as if I am the narrator of this book about me, and I am telling you, hey, it's the first day of the first chapter of my book about me, and I'm here to tell you this story about me, and I can describe to you what's going on in my head. I can address you directly, or I can kind of soften that direct address to the reader, although sometimes first person does have that sense of immediacy and breaking the fourth wall. I can describe to you what's going on in the scene that I'm in. I'm in this room. My cat is over there. I've got a glass of water. So I can describe external things. It's not just that I'm in my head. And if somebody speaks to me, I can portray their dialogue because I'm present for it, right? So it's very locked into the experience of the narrator. That is first person. Now, I want to soften that a little bit by just reminding you that a first person narrator, it feels pretty narrow in a sense, but each one of us is certainly capable of talking about a lot of things, right? We're able to remember the past. We're able to share opinions. We're able to fantasize about the future. We can speculate about other people. We can imagine what they're thinking. We can interpret events. So we each, as human beings, contain multitudes. And so a first person narrator is a conceit of a single person narrating a story. But just remember that a single person actually has quite a lot to say. It's not such a claustrophobic experience as it might at first sound. So that's first person. Anything that narrator can perceive or experience or knows about or has heard about or can speculate about, they're free to say, just as we all are in life. We do go on in life, don't we? Or maybe I'm just speaking for myself there. Third person is rather different. And that's what we're going to focus on in this talk, because this is where the head hopping can happen. Third person has this same expansive quality of, laying a human consciousness bare with all of the knowledge and emotional truth, experience, backstory, ability to project into the future, physical detail, all of the experience of being human. Third person can incorporate that as well, but it's not, technically speaking, just limited to one person's experience. So so first person is expansive, but third person has all of that expansiveness, not just for one character, but potentially for any character that wanders into the book. But that's not even the biggest, coolest thing about third person. Third person also incorporates this narrating consciousness, if you will. There's someone or something, some entity, perhaps named, often not, who is actually telling the story. There's this like storytelling consciousness. That is the third person, I suppose, that third person is named after. There's this other kind of cosmic thing going on, which is both why third person is so cool, but also why it is perilous to writers, because it's like a buffet of options. There's a lot to manage in third person. You're always organizing at least these two things. You're organizing this narrating, storytelling consciousness, and you're organizing the story, the experience of your primary character. So at the bare minimum, you've got those two things going on. And also, you are negotiating, sometimes successfully, or as in the case of the book that Molly just told us about, less successfully, you're negotiating the temptation to use that, superpower of just being able to go into everybody's head, and you succumb to the temptation. You're following all of those impulses to track the experiences of anybody who walks onto the page. That's what we call head hopping. And the first point that I really want you to take away from at least this description of basic description, obviously there's a ton to say about writing in third person, but in this basic description, what I want you to get is that this capacity to head hop is not, as the programmers say, as the IT people say, it's not a bug, it's a feature. It's part of what makes third person. The capacity to do it is part of what makes third person. All right. Now, you might then say, and if you are one of those folks, and I know you're out there, and don't be shy, no one's going to be mad at you, because I feel this myself as a writer creatively. If you're one of those people that says, well, if third person is able to go into everybody's subjective experience, if it's able to go into the heads of all these characters, it's able also to wrap the whole thing in this storytelling consciousness, who is, as is often said of third person, omniscient, all-knowing, who's got these, massive storytelling powers, able to reach into the past and the future and break the fourth wall and do all these things. Like, isn't that what's cool about writing in third person? And if you choose to write in third person and you don't use all those bells and whistles, aren't you just cheating? You're just wimping out. You're not taking advantage of it. All right, settle down, storytellers. I too am a fan of writing in the third person. I am a big fan of writing in the third person. I've written a lot of books in the third person. I've written some books in the first person as well, but I really enjoy writing in the third person. And when I write in the third person, I, like you, am attracted to the complexity. I'm attracted to the wide range of options, and I like to play with them. I like to see what I can get away with, right? So how can it be wrong? It's just all of these tools are there. Are we supposed to use them or not? So that's the question. How do we get from the toy box, the rich toy box of third person, to this experience that Molly had as a reader of saying, well, somebody went to that toy box and was playing with all the toys at once, and I, as a reader, couldn't follow it, to the point that I got frustrated, annoyed, and I put the book down. So that's the thing. So here's the answer, and Molly really sort of has it laid out for us. When we head hop, we write in third person, and we head hop, we fail to resist the temptation to just, turn all the dials at once, the many, many dials of third person that are available to us. It's not so much a point of view error as it is a storytelling error. So that's the difference. When you head hop in third person, hey, that's what third person is good at doing. I mean, that's what it's built for in a sense, but it's not great storytelling. And so if you are someone who has either been given that feedback, like, yeah, this is a little head hoppy, can you stick to one viewpoint character in this scene, please? If you've gotten that note, or if you've been in a workshop, or a class or a program where you've seen someone else get that note, and you've said, I wonder why that's better, it's because all of writing craft ultimately is designed to help us create a great experience for the reader. And head hopping can be, when done without control, a very bad and disruptive experience for the reader. Now, if it's a storytelling error, let's just pause for a minute and check in with what that means. What is a storytelling error? Well, we know what a story is by now, I hope, if you've been watching these live streams, you've heard me say this before. Our storytelling job is not to put beautiful sentences on the page, but to imagine a journey of transformation that is centered on a single character, and to fully depict that journey of transformation in such a way that our reader does not experience it as something that someone told them about, but rather as something they experienced for themselves. Now, this is an idea that has been talked about by a lot of writers and, important thinkers about writers. It's well examined in a concept called the fictional dream, which is a phrase that was created and written about by a prominent 20th century writing teacher and also novelist named John Gardner. But you don't have to go on a whole, MFA craft book binge to understand what this is. It's really very simple. The fictional dream, or this experience of the reader having lived it for themselves, it's just what we mean by something being immersive. And my Star Trek fans, my fellow Star Trek fans out there know about the holodeck, right? It's like where video gaming wants to go. Anyone who's a gamer knows this. It's not just that you're playing a game that's about pieces on a board. You are getting the opportunity to inhabit a character within the game, within the landscape, your avatar, right? And you're getting to do the things. You're getting to go on the adventure. You get to decide, what happens next. So this is in novels, the writer gets to decide what happens next, but the experience of the main character serving as an avatar for the reader is the same. Right? It's the same. And the world of the story is an immersive world full of sensory information, emotional fluctuations, all of the experiences of life. But the experience of the hero has been designed to take them not just through a series of episodes, but on a singular, irrevocable, meaningful journey of transformation. Now, one of our great collective mentors about storytelling is the great mythologist Joseph Campbell. And in his phrase, it is a transformation of consciousness. It's not a trivial change. It's not going from, I used to like peanut butter and grape jelly, and now I really like peanut butter and strawberry jelly. Like I'm a whole new person now. It's not like just that kind of silly change. It's a transformation of consciousness. I used to be this kind of person. Now I'm this kind of person. I used to be immature. Now I'm mature. My values changed. I came into my power, right? I've been on a big journey of change. And so Joseph Campbell calls this the hero's journey. We talk about this a lot in the Path of the Storyteller program. It's just a magnificent model for effective storytelling. But the point is that if a transformation of consciousness is what we're after, and third person point of view has got this ability to use a storytelling consciousness, this invented storytelling consciousness, to tell a story about a character. It's not the storytelling consciousness that's going on the journey of transformation. It's the character. It's this protagonist, what we would call the hero. And so if it's the hero's journey of transformation, that is the head that we want to spend the most time in. And if we don't stick to it, if we're not faithful to it enough, the reader does not get that experience of going themselves on a journey of transformation, not just being told about random transformative experiences that 12 other characters are having, but themselves experiencing the journey, having the vicarious thrill of being Ebenezer Scrooge and waking up Christmas morning a new man, having that vicarious emotional experience of Jane Eyre going through all her trials and tribulations, sticking to her principles. And in the end, she gets the guy and she gets to say, Rita, I married him. I know that's in the first person, but still, stories are about transformation of consciousness. So it's not an intellectual thing. It's not something we want to hear about secondhand. It is really a journey that we want to go on. And so the head hopping messes this up so effectively. It's like one of the most disruptive things we can do. Now, let me take you back to the holodeck on Star Trek. And those of you who don't know Star Trek, well, first of all, come on, get with it now. But a holodeck is like a virtual reality room or environment so that the characters can get in it, And so let's say, I don't know, if you wanted to be plunged into the world of your favorite book, whatever that might be, if you wanted to go, here, I'll just grab this book that happens to be here because I'm going to read from it in a minute. If you yourself wanted to hang out on a farm with the animals of Charlotte's Web and you went into the holodeck and you said, holodeck, give me the farm in Charlotte's Web. I want to hang out with Fern and I want to talk to the geese and I just want to interact with, Charlotte and I want to hang out with my favorite characters, like as me, like this. It's almost like this, what people accomplish by writing fan fiction. Just putting themselves in the world. So think about that now. And now let's say there's a light switch on the wall. I'm really mixing my centuries and levels of technology, but bear with me. And there's a switch on the wall that turns the holodeck on and off. So you're there, you're sitting on a bale of hay, you and Fern are just kind of, talking about whether you want to have some lemonade or maybe go play on the tire swing. And somebody just flicks the switch and then you're back in your room. Fern's gone. There's no tire swing. There's no lemonade. It's really disruptive. And then a couple of minutes later, they turn it back on and you're back on the farm and there's Fern and there's the lemonade and there's the tire swing. And you're like, okay, slight interruption, but I'm back. And you get like another 90 seconds of enjoying this world. And then someone flips the switch again and you're back sitting in your car, like it's gone. It's so frustrating. Right? You just don't get the fun. You don't get the experience. So if that image helps you understand why Molly was so dissatisfied with this book with all the head hopping, now you're on board with me. So that's it. Anytime you leave that main journey of transformation, you've just kind of turned off the main road and you're really annoying your reader. And I just want to say, as writers, we really overestimate sometimes, or we don't think about it sufficiently, how much discomfort or inconvenience we can put our readers through before they will simply put the book down. And, as writers, we like to imagine that our readers are committed to reading our book. But as readers, we know we're not committed to reading the book. We're committed to reading this page. And we have to earn every page turn. We really do. As writers, we have to earn every page turn from our readers. And the way we do that is by good storytelling. And the way we do that is by not trying their patience with the kinds of mistakes that can just make the reader say, I give up. I'm not that interested. And they won't necessarily be able to articulate why, by the way. Molly is a writer and a Path of the Storyteller alum. And so she knows why. She's like, this is head hopping. I didn't sign up for this. I don't have time for this. I can go read a book that's going to engage me. I'm going to go read a book in which the writer was thinking about me, the reader, while they were crafting and making decisions about how to tell the story. But as writers, we sometimes assume that our readers are going to be as interested in what we have to say as we are. This is kind of a normal type of narcissism, I suppose, because we're so interested and it all makes sense to us, and we know where it's going. We know that the things that we leave underexplained or underimagined or forget to make clear are going to make sense 20 pages from now, we hope, but our reader's going to be gone by then. So this is one of the hard truths of storytelling. And, it's not really a hard truth. You have to get over the kind of beginner's mindset of imagining that your reader is there for you. Like, no, it's the other way around. You are there to serve them. So we don't want to break up this fictional dream. We don't want to flip the switch of the holodeck on and off by head hopping. So I think that's a pretty basic explanation of why head hopping doesn't work. Now, I'm just looking at the comments because you guys are so brilliant always. And there is a great comment here I'm going to bring up from Hillary as a way of getting to the next part of this talk, which is, yes, but don't we sometimes see books that incorporate multiple points of view and it's great and it works? That's what I want to talk about next. So let's look at Hillary's very good question here. Is wanting to experience the important story events why it works to hop into Smaug's experience when he goes to attack Dale in The Hobbit? Hillary, brilliant question and so on point with what I want to talk about now. So Hillary raises, first of all, The Hobbit, which is a tremendously good example of a book written in a third person that, uses a lot of the tools of third person. It is not shy about writing in the third person. It uses an omniscient narrator. It has a viewpoint character, but it sometimes goes into other characters' viewpoints, so I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to put this down, Hillary. We are going to include a little discussion of the part of The Hobbit where we go into the consciousness of Smaug the dragon. Amazing. All right. So we'll talk about The Hobbit, and I also am going to talk about Charlotte's Web, because these are two examples of books written in a kind of really confident, skillful, like masterful, expansive third person. And it is a super fun thing to do, but not for the faint of heart, right? So this is what we're going to talk about now. It takes a lot of skill and intention to do it. Now, the first reason that it might work to use, this Tolstoy style, it's kind of a classical mode of storytelling, but people say that often, like, oh, that's so 19th century. It's like, no, books are still written like this, but it is complex. It is complex to do, and it will only work. I'm going to go through a few reasons that would make it work. It can only work, first of all, if the main plot, the central storyline, is so crystal clear to the reader that sense of the switch going on and off is not that the dream is over and then on again and over and then on again. It's not that we're continually plunged back from the book to the car, from the book to the car. That's not what happens. Instead, it's more a feeling of entering a new room of the holodeck, right? I hope that image is helpful. The main plot and the world building and the general sense of what journey we are on, that primary journey, is so solid that veering into like a little side room or going a little bit off the main experience does not make the whole thing go up in a puff of smoke. It's so clear. Now, let's look at the two examples I'm going to put forth as really successful third person narratives that incorporate some quote unquote head hopping, or let's just say a confident, complete use of all the powers of third person. The Hobbit, there is never a question from whatever page it is that the adventure begins. I think it's page 2, that Gandalf first arrives and says, Bilbo, my friend, I'm going to send you on this adventure, and here's what it is. We never doubt for a second what that book is about. Bilbo's got to do this thing. And it all culminates in him confronting Smaug the dragon and trying to get this gold back. This is the plot of The Hobbit. It's like one of those caper movies. Like we're going to go to this place. We're going to deal with this bad guy, to them, the dragon, who's on the gold, hoarding it, guarding it. We're going to somehow deal with the dragon. It's never really clear. They don't have a good strategy for that. Their strategy is we're going to send Bilbo in and we're going to steal the gold back, and that's going to be the end of it. There's never a page in The Hobbit that we forget that that's what they're doing. It's all they're doing through the whole book. Now, I'm going to go on a little detour to talk about this idea of the mission, because this is why you will often hear me say that the hero's mission is one thing and it works and it lasts the whole book. And if you can't tell me or your reader what the hero's mission is that lasts the whole book, you may not have sorted out what the story is. If a book as kind of fully imagined, let's just say, as The Hobbit, can settle for having basically one hero and one mission, surely your book can too. It's more than enough to craft a wonderful novel. So we can watch Tolkien confidently go into the experiences only occasionally, only rarely, of a couple of other characters in The Hobbit. But if you go back and you look at The Hobbit, you will see that uh, it's Bilbo, 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 like page after page after page. Occasionally, that narrating consciousness will say, well, while Bilbo is locked in a barrel, while he's a prisoner, let's check in with what's going on over here, because it's third person and the narrator can do that, which is so cool. But there are a couple of times in the book where this narrator actually goes into the mind of another character. And one of them is Smaug, as Hilary notes. And the other one, very briefly, is Gollum. In the chapter earlier in the second act of The Hobbit, where Bilbo and Gollum meet for the first time and they play a game of riddles. It's a very significant scene in the whole world building because it's where Bilbo gets the Ring of Power. So it's a cool chapter. It's almost self-contained, like a short story, but there's a little passage in it in which we go into Gollum's head. Now, if you just want to pause for a second and say, well, what does Gollum have in common with Smaug? Oh, these are both like shadow figures, right? So these are both, and I'm using shadow in its archetypal sense. That these are not just like villains, bad guys. These are significant central shadow figures who, in a sense, hold a mirror up to Bilbo. We won't go on a whole little lecture about The Hobbit, much as I would love to, because we're going to stick with our topic today. But I want you, if you know The Hobbit well, and you should, I hope you do, if you think about what it means for Bilbo to encounter Gollum, given Gollum's history and what Gollum's obsession is, this precious ring. He's got this precious, precious, precious object, right? And we are watching Bilbo go from this very materialistic hobbit who's very concerned with social status and his possessions and his beautiful hobbit hole and his silver and all his like perfect things. That's who he was when we met him, to who he's going to become at the end of this book. Gollum is no mere bad guy, right? He's sort of reflecting back like, oh, literally, I am what you could become if things go terribly wrong. Then later, at the end of the second act, there's this climactic ordeal in which Bilbo meets Gollum and Bilbo meets Smaug. Finally, that's what we've been waiting for the whole book. That is the scene that we promised the reader. And what is Smaug but a dragon who's hoarding a pile of gold? Oh, interesting. You start to see the thematic resonance here. So twice in the book, Bilbo encounters not just a bad guy, not just a troll, not just a goblin, not just a spider, but some archetypal opposition that is not just against him, but is against him as if he is looking into a dark mirror. He's looking at some twisted, dark version of his worst impulses taken to their fulfillment. Now, that's not the direction he's going to go, but that's what a transformation of consciousness is all about. We're going to watch Bilbo go in quite the opposite direction until he finishes his journey by saying, you know, all that gold that you promised me in order for me to go on this journey with you, I don't want any of it. Keep it. I don't want it. I'm going to sacrifice all of it and even my own life. What I want now is just peace. I want to do all of that to stop the war. So that is a true hero's journey. So thanks for that fantastic question, Hilary. You will find that is a not uncommon thing. If there's a shadow archetype in a significant scene, that some glimpse of the inner life of that shadow archetype can be very powerful. I'm going to use one more example that my Path of the Storyteller students know. In the short story Rikki Tikki Tavi, there is one section where Rikki is battling this cobra, or is about to battle. He encounters this gigantic cobra. And the narrator tells us, even though it's Ricky's point of view throughout the whole rest of that section, that the cobra was in his heart afraid. And it's like, oh, so cool. It's so cool to know that, right? So that's another interesting example of how that worthy special opponent of our hero, sometimes a glimpse into their heart is very, very dramatic. But it's because it's just adding like this other turn to the hero's journey, right? It's just, in a sense, like just going a little deeper into the hero's journey. So that was one of the ones I wanted to talk about. It can work if it's involving the shadow archetype. So thank you, Hillary, for getting me there. And I already talked about the fact that it can work, this use of multiple viewpoints, if you will, if the main plot is so solid and clear that the reader is never really going to lose touch with it. And the other one that I wanted to share, actually I have two more. It can work when a community of characters is part of the transformation of consciousness that's being depicted. And this is where I just wanted to share just a tiny passage from Charlotte's Web, which is a book, by the way, that any third grader can read with absolute comprehension and pleasure. But it is written in a sophisticated, omniscient third person that is like, the kind of storytelling that far too many people, I'm going to get on my opinionated little soapbox right now. Far too many people will say, oh, kids can't read stuff that they can't follow a complicated third person narration. It's such nonsense. Of course they can. So I'm just going to read a little passage. And honestly, this book is so good at this technical use of the third person that I could have flipped open to almost any page and found a passage. So I flipped open to this page and I found a passage to share with you. It's the moment, if you remember the plot of Charlotte's Web, where Wilbur has, he's competed in the county fair in order to gain enough status in the eyes of the community that he will not be slaughtered, that he will be elevated out of his original fate of being bred to be slaughtered and turned into bacon, and will somehow play a different role in the community. It will save his life. So the stakes could not be higher. And here's the passage. And now one of the judges climbed into the ring with the prizes. He handed Mr. Zuckerman, who's Wilbur's owner, he's the farmer, 2 $10 bills and a $5 bill. Then he tied the medal around Wilbur's neck. Then he shook hands with Mr. Zuckerman while Wilbur blushed. Avery put out his hand and the judge shook hands with him too. The crowd cheered. A photographer took Wilbur's picture. A great feeling of happiness swept over the Zuckermans and the Arables. This was the greatest moment in Mr. Zuckerman's life. It is deeply satisfying to win a prize in front of a lot of people. Now, as you can see from that passage, the moment of Wilbur actually being awarded the medal is like a shared triumph. And so our omniscient narrator here is able to say that this feeling of happiness swept over the Zuckermans and the Arables, the other family who, were the ones who bred Wilbur to begin with. And we get this feeling of satisfaction of Mr. Zuckerman. Now, we know that Wilbur's the one whose life has just been saved, but the narration here sort of chooses to focus on the community. And it's a really interesting moment because what Wilbur has done is he's fainted. He's fainted with kind of shock and bliss and exhaustion. The whole thing's been so stressful. And so it's kind of a moment where our hero's consciousness is not really available to us. And it's quite intentional, right? It's quite intentional. So from an archetypal standpoint or from a hero's journey standpoint, Wilbur is having like this death and rebirth experience. Like his life was just saved and he just passes out. But the glory of the moment is then like it spreads out into the families who accept the medal and they shake hands and they're all feeling so good. And we focus on the happiness and the satisfaction of winning the prize in front of everyone, of the very man who would have slaughtered Wilbur had this not happened. It's so great. It's so sophisticated. So that's an example as well, that there's a kind of a following the storytelling choice that's made with a kind of precision and sensitivity to what story is being told. It's a very big moment of storytelling, and there's a great satisfaction in the way E.B. White, the master of storytelling and prose, handles it by just sort of taking Wilbur out of the picture and like letting this moment be given to the farmers and the families. So that's another thing that you can, occasionally get away with a moment like that, and it'll feel really good. And then the last thing that I want to say is about when it might work or what might make it work to zip back and forth between viewpoints, different viewpoint characters. It's absolutely necessary to do this. There have to be very clear, what I call lane dividers between the viewpoints, and you do it when it's necessary, and you do it in the context of something that has clear structure. So my familiar imagery for this is, now that I live in California, these vast superhighways with so many lanes. Now, I'm not the kind of driver that likes to weave between lanes and speed up and pass people at random. I am that driver. You can imagine what kind of driver I am. I'm not in the right lane. I'm like in the second to right lane. I take my time, watch my GPS. If I've got to change lanes, I like to know a couple of miles ahead of time so I can do it in increments. I'm just not playing fast and loose with myself. So you have to write this way as well. You know why? Because who's in the back seat? In a like a baby seat, like asleep, having a fictional dream? Your reader, right? So if you swerve and you go over bumps and you speed up and slow down and you zip back and forth across all these lanes without a plan, you're rushing to get where you need to go, and you've got to, break and go. Who's going to wake up from their fictional dream? The reader. You don't want to do that. You have to drive like you have a sleeping baby in the back seat, because you do. You do. When you're writing fiction, you have a sleeping baby in the back seat of your authorial car, and that baby is your reader. And they're having a dream, and we do not want to wake them up. We don't want to disrupt them. We don't want to be flicking that switch of the holodeck on and off, right? So what does that mean? It means that we stay in our lane until we have a good reason to switch. And when we switch, we do it cleanly, we commit, and we stay there for a while. What we don't do is just zoom back and forth without a plan and without any sense of control, and just jumble all the lanes together. That is the experience that Molly described in the book that she tried to read, and there was so much head hopping. That writer was so swervy on the highway, was just going randomly from lane to lane, speeding up, slowing down for no good reason, that she got car sick and said, I'm not going to take this ride anymore. That's what the reader will do. Okay. So how do we not create this, unsavory experience for our reader? We have to look at what our lane dividers are in fiction. We've got scenes within chapters. We've got chapters. Sometimes we have sections. Our books are divided, right? They're in subdivisions. A paragraph break is a kind of subdivision. So you can use those dividers kind of as lane dividers. This does not mean that if you switch to a new viewpoint character in every paragraph, it's not going to make your reader car sick. It will. That seems like a lot, right? You need a reason to switch. It needs to have that feeling of like, okay, the hero's unconscious. We're going to go to the community, as E.B. White does in that Charlotte's Web example. Or as Hillary pointed out, our hero, Bilbo, is not in this scene. We're going to actually take a little ride with the shadow archetype of the piece and go and see what their perspective is. Because from their perspective, they have been terribly wronged, and they are about to go on a rampage. And the rampage that they go on, I'm talking about Smaug the Dragon now, is the direct consequence of what our hero just did. It is the consequence of the hero fulfilling that end of second act ordeal, and it is going to be the cause of everything that our hero is going to have to do in the third act. So even though we leave Bilbo for a minute to have this experience with Smaug, it is sewn in to his journey of transformation. It's a very central moment of his plot, just as Wilbur winning that medal is a central moment of Wilbur's plot. So you can do it for that kind of clear storytelling reason. You can do it if you use some common sense about where the natural breaks are. You can start a new chapter, start a new scene, switch when necessary. All right. So rely upon structure to give you those clear lane divisions and do it for a reason. All right. Now, I did another live stream not that long ago about the idea of plots and subplots. And you might want to check that out if this conversation makes you ask this question, which is, yeah, but can't I interweave like a primary plot and a lesser plot, and those, there's lots of storytelling that is done that way. And the answer is yes, you can, but it's less appealing to the reader than you might think. And so many stories, substantial, complicated stories, are written that don't rely that much on subplots. They really don't. You can depict these subplots of like little mini arcs of transformation for your secondary characters, but you don't have to go into their viewpoints in order to do that, because they are there in your story to support the hero on their journey, either as allies or forces of opposition, or to contribute other types of archetypal energy. And so you can depict their plots without having to go into a whole new holodeck for them. They're going to be coming in and out of your hero's story, and we're going to get to see their behavior. We're going to get to see their journeys of transformation as well, right? If you think that way. So you have to rely upon story structure in order to weave all that stuff together coherently. So if you want more on that topic, go watch the other live stream I did about plots and subplots. Now, I want to end with some tough love. Emphasis on the love, as is always the case. You know me, I am on your side. I'm always on the writer's side. Writers get the urge to head hop often, not because they are thinking of the reader. They mostly get the urge to do it because they're drafting, and they're drafting very freely, which is a perfectly fine thing to do in drafting. But because they are not drafting with a commitment to story structure, their drafting is very indulgent. Now, I'm kind of contradicting advice that you probably have heard a lot of times, which is everything is okay in a draft. I've given this advice, like just go make a messy mud pie, it's fine. Your draft is an exploratory document. It's where you're going to sort of figure out the answers to the basic questions about your story. But if you do not have clarity about story structure, and you haven't committed to writing a draft of a story, what you are going to write a draft of is a lot of pages of words. And in order to keep writing, you're going to potentially have the impulse to just keep starting new stories, right? And this is a way of avoiding a lack of clarity about what your job really is supposed to be. When you head hop as part of your drafting, you're generating pages, you're creating the illusion of progress, but you're not really learning as much as you think you are about this main journey of transformation of your main character that you basically have set down to explore. So you have to be willing to know your own tendencies and your own process well enough to know, am I head hopping in my drafts as a way of generating useful material that does have something to do with my story? Or am I using it as a form of procrastination to avoid confronting the limitations of my writing craft and story structure knowledge? Or, it's the old image that I've also used before. It's like, if you want to dig a well and actually hit water, you can dig one hole deep enough to hit water. And let's say, for argument's sake, it's 500 feet down. I don't know if that's actually accurate. So geologists out there, forgive me if that's like a reasonable depth for a well. But let's just say, for argument's sake, if the water is 500 feet down and you dig a well that gets down to 500 feet, you're going to hit water. But if you dig 5 different wells and each 100 feet deep, you did the same amount of digging, didn't you? It was just as much work. You still don't have any water. And if you keep thinking, well, if I just dig another 100-foot hole, I'm going to find what I need. Well, I don't need to finish this story. You're never going to get any water. So this is something that can happen to writers when you're drafting. All this head hopping can be a way of just digging a lot of shallow holes. Now, if you use it to explore the personalities of different characters and stuff like that, fine. But just know you're creating a big job for yourself, because when you go back to revise, you're going to end up dropping most of those other points of view. It's not going to be useful to you, really. None of that writing is going to be salvageable. And what you haven't fully explored is how your hero, who's the one whose story you really should be developing in your drafts, what the purpose of that secondary character is to the hero. What role do they play in the hero's story? We understand what role Smaug plays in Bilbo's story. So when we go for a minute into Smaug's head, we don't lose the fact that that's why Smaug's in this book to begin with. If this wasn't a story about Bilbo going on this journey, we don't need a dragon, right? So Smaug's there for Bilbo, and we, the reader, are going on the ride with Bilbo. So just be a little careful about that. You do not need to head hop at all to have fun with a third person point of view. And I just want to end with this reminder. If you've got that one main hero, that one viewpoint character in a third person book, that's not all you have. Because what you always also have is that narrating consciousness. And when you've got the narrating consciousness and you've got the viewpoint character, you already have two lanes that are so full of possibility that just going back and forth between those two lanes is more than enough to write a really, really satisfying novel that's not going to feel thin. It's not going to feel underimagined. There's nothing you can't do with just those two lanes. Okay, so remember that. It's more than enough. Anything else you include for a very good reason with a very clear lane change and maybe only just a tiny bit of it, right? That's extra, but you don't even need to do it. So just remember that you've got enough. You've got enough to work with. All right. Now, I think that we're going to go home with these two reminders. One of which is that your job when you're making any decisions about point of view and these kinds of structural decisions, it's not to indulge your own desire to try every technique in the book. You're going to write a lot of books. You can use a lot of techniques, but you don't need to put them all on the same page. The first thing you want to do is tell the story. And the other first thing you want to do is to serve the reader. So serve your story, serve your reader, make all of your decisions with those two things in mind, and you are going to be okay. You will drive safely to the end of your story. All right. That's what I've got to share with you today. If you've got any questions, this is a good time to put them in the comments. I'm just going to take a moment to look at the stuff that you have already posted. Terry Finn, thank you so much for reprising this little piece of advice. Yeah, this is a keeper. This is one for the Post-it note. You have to earn every page turn. Your reader is not, your indulgent friend who's like, I loved it. I read every page. It's like, but did they want to? You really have to make your reader want to read it. Okay. Molly is grooving on the baby in the back seat analogy. It's a good one. I'm glad it works for you, Molly. Always remember your reader is having a beautiful dream of your devising. You don't want to wake them up from it. And that's right. And Molly also says, I won't share it, but continuing to describe what was unsatisfying about the book that she didn't like. There was no reason for the lane changes. Oh gosh, have you ever been stuck in a car with someone else driving who drives like that? Oh, you know how it feels. It's awful. It's awful. So don't put your reader in that experience. You don't want to do it. All right. And Cynthia's here and says, always helpful. Thank you. You are so welcome, Cynthia. And you're so welcome, everybody else. I do hope this was of benefit. If you're watching the replay, remember that I have more goodies to offer you, and I would love to get to know you better. Come on over to pathofthestoryteller.com, join the mailing list. You're going to get an announcement quite soon about a new course offering and the beginning of the enrollment for the fall Path of the Storyteller program, which I'm so excited about. Now that we're in July, we're going to do a little pre-enroll before the month is out, which is going to be the best time to enroll, and just in terms of getting the best price and best opportunity to get a seat. So this is a really good time to get on the mailing list for that. If you're watching on YouTube and you're not subscribed to the channel, this would be a wonderful thing to do. Please subscribe. If the content was a benefit, give it a thumbs up. That helps the content get shown to more folks. And I know there are other storytellers out there who have these kinds of questions, and I want to be able to help them as well. Thank you so much for being part of this Path of the Storyteller community, everyone. I'm so glad you were here. Great comments. Love weaving them into the conversation. Continue to leave comments if more questions come up, or if you have a request for an idea for a future live stream. I would really love to hear about it. So just post it in the comments below and I will see it and respond. All right, everybody, have a wonderful week. I'll see you next time.